reinforce everything Jerry said. The library here is amazing. I mean, a lot of what I have here I found in the library, in this very library. And I wander from one library to the other, so I'm like to turn up and walk and stand at Doctor's Barn in Chicago, and inevitably I end up here because the facilities here are brilliant. So encourage you all to join it and make use of it. We don't use our facilities like these, but we lose them. Simple as. So this, as Jerry said, delighted. First of all, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Cathy, or Cathy Scuffil. I'm from the inner city, grew up in Doctor's Barn, and my hobby all my life was local history. I worked in the health service. I loved that, took a career break, and now I'm working as a historian in residence with Dublin City Council. Doesn't mean you get a house, just clear that up. Just means you have this kind of title, which is a bit of a mouthful. But it also means you get to come to cool places and meet cool people. Had a great morning this morning with the transition years in St. Dominic's in Ballyfermot, and we had been with them before this, and they were doing their projects today. That was a wonderful morning. I had to leave a bit early because I was doing another presentation in the Liberties then later on, and it was great fun with that. So I hope you enjoy this. It's an angle on Ballyfermot that you might have thought of. There's a couple of things in it. Every talk I do, I try and tell you something you know, you don't know. I'm going to try and make you laugh, and I might make you cry, you know, and it's not really anything personal, but that's the way I try and structure them. So you might get something from this, and I hope you enjoy what I'm going to put together for you. A very, very interesting time. It's our national history as well as international history, but this is local history. So let's see how all those things mesh together. So let's have a look at Ballyfermot, 1914-ish, thereabouts, okay, kind of 104 years ago. Generally, once you went past Inchicore, you were in the sticks, you were in the country. It was fields, it was meadows, it was farmland. But there are people living out here. I mean, there's communities all out this way. You kind of have a landscape of a mixture of very large farms, some of which would have been legacies from when they reordered everything after the famine. So some people would have got farms after the famine time. There was a thing called the encumbered estates. Farms went into the equivalent of NAM, and then they were divided up again after the famine. Some of them would have gone back that far. Then you had all these little cottage clusters. So we have things like the Landy cottages out here. You had little communes and little clusters of community living together. Did a trawl on the 1911 census. Ballyfermot's a little bit hard to track on 1911 because you have to look at it from the Paris-town side of things, and then you have to look at it from the Clondalkin side of things. It doesn't really sit on its own, probably because of its rural nature. But when I went through it, primarily you were either a farmer, a labourer, or a farm labourer, you know, you might put the two together. A lot of people describe themselves as a dairy man or a dairy boy. So it's all about providing the milk and everything else for the city. In between that, we have a number of people who worked in the waterworks, because we had different waterworks. Anyone from the talk last week would have heard me talking about the Rathmines waterworks up in the canal near Park West. But then we have another set of waterworks down near Bluebell. So these waterworks where you would have worked, you would have lived beside where you worked. So they were there as well. And then there's a whole chunk of locals working in the railway works in Inchicore. I mean, you think about it, they're not far away at all. That's their last big piece of industry leaving the city. So it was a natural place for people to go and work, serve their time, get a trade and work there. And it would have been the big thing at the time. And you wonder if in that world of a rural landscape, large farms, cottages and all of the above, how would it have been affected by world or even national events? So I'm going to have a look at that. And you can see there's a typical census records from the area. This family are living in Landy cottages in Ballyfermot. The Ryans, this is their census returns, and you can see he describes himself as a farm labourer. We'll come back to that in a little while, but that's just an example of the type of census return that came up in the Ballyfermot area. Now, I tried to paint a picture, and I hope you have an image something like that in your head. That is rural Upper Ballyfermot, and I'm really grateful to Ken, Sean and Suzanne and the rest of the Heritage group here, because they've got some fantastic photographs online and they've allowed me to use them tonight. So there you go, there's your rural Ballyfermot, and you can see it the farm fields are stretching pretty much as far as the eye can see. But look at the little clusters, the little groups of houses that are around as well. People living in that rural community. That's one shot. And blue here, this is taken more from the bluebell side of things. And what you can see is the line of cottages. Can you make them out in the middle of the picture there? A lot of them are actually touching the canal. You know, they're not too far from the canal. So you get these land-lead cottages, each coming with about an acre of land. And the idea was you could be self-sufficient in your vegetables and grow what you needed. And that was the whole idea, giving people good gardens with the house. You could grow your own, basically. And a lot of them would have done that, and that supplemented the household and looked after everything in the house. Just to hammer home the point of how rural things were, look finding these little ads in the newspaper. And here's one telling all about the meadows. 20 Irish acres and prime old meadow, okay? And that's a Blackditch. Now, you see the Clondalkin being used, so that's what I'm saying to you. You get Clondalkin mentioned, you get Chapelizod, you get Palmerstown mentioned. That's because Ballyfermot was kind of divided up into the different regions. But then you can see the other ads. Here's a set of ads, all about different bits of farm land, up for sale, up for auction, up for rent. You get these ads regularly in the paper. Funny thing is the name Fottrell there. It's an unusual enough surname, and I've come across it in two other things I was doing. There was a Mr. Fottrell lived in Virginia House up in Springfield in Tala, and he was actually a solicitor, and he worked for a company in Anglesey Street in Dublin. I suspect, like the way all the Scuffils are related to me, all the Fottrells must have been related in some way or other. And I'm just curious about the link between Mrs. Fottrell, who's living in Galvanstown, Ballyfermot, and presumably her relation who lived up in Virginia House in Tala. That's just little things like this. You start seeing patterns as you start doing bits of work. Now, I promise we go back and have a look at the Rhines. This is the Rhines census form from 1911. Remember, I had it in smaller earlier on. Now, land-lead cottages. Again, I'm really, really grateful to Ken for this one, because there's actually a picture of the land-lead cottages, and the Ryan family were living in #1 land-lead cottages, and we've managed to establish that they were around Leffernu Road, you know, so what we would know as Leffernu Road today. There would have been old cottages there, which came with their own little parcel of land. Most of them were semi-detached. If you want to see something like them up near Crumlin as well, you see them on Kildare Road, Rafters Road in Crumlin have similar arrangements with the cottages and a fairly big parcel of land with them. And you find them dotted all around County Dublin. And they are a legacy of post-famine when we divided up our land as well. So the Ryan family are living in one of them. And just to make it easy, from taking it from the census form, I'm going to do a who do you think you are moment now, and we'll turn it into a family tree, and we'll just have a look at it for a minute. And here they are, John and Mary Ryan. He's a farm labourer, and both of them are from Queen's County in County Laois. Then we would know it as County Laois today. Queen's County is how it's returned on the census. They have 2 children living at home. Patrick, who is a farm labourer like his dad, and Agnes is one of the daughters. But when you look further into the 1911 census, you find that there are 6 others in the family. And when I went digging a little bit more further, didn't I find that they had a son called William, who is also a general labourer, but William has moved out of the family home, and he's now living in 11 James Street in Dublin. By going through birth certs and marriage certs and various bits and pieces, I managed to put all that together. I had a real, I was really living the rhymes at that stage and going through the family and seeing what I could piece together. So William is living in 11 James Street in Dublin. So let's take a closer look at William. So again, I'm taking him, and we just have a look at him. And William married a girl called Bridget Carr. And he got married in Golden Bridge Chapel in 1908. And in 1908, William was living in Stonehouse Lodge, Ballyfermot. And Stonehouse Stonehouse Lodge is where Marketing Park is now. It would have been located there. Kind of the Inchicore, Sarsfield Road end of things, but definitely in Ballyfermot. So when he got married from Stonehouse Lodge, and he married this girl called Bridget Carr. She's a tailoress. Now, a lot of the tailoresses who lived around James Street were tailoresses to the army. They actually would have made shirts and jackets and things for the army then, particularly Richmond Barracks. It's a huge barracks in the area. It has a big effect on the area, and that's where an awful lot of them were actually working. By 1913, they had 3 little girls. They have their little girl called Mary, that's called after his mother. Bridget, called after her own mum, and then another little girl called Josephine. So she's only born in 1913. So you start piecing the family together bit by bit. So you wonder what sort of a world they were living in 1913, 1914. What was it like in James Street at that time? Having moved from rural Ballyfermot, having been living in the Landleaf Cottage and then living in Stonehouse Lodge, and then he goes and he's living in James Street with his wife, who also had moved in, if you like, from the Inchicore area. And to give you an idea of what might have been happening in James Street, here's an account I found in 1914 when big recruitment meetings were going to take place. What would happen? When the lads were knocking off work, say in Guinness's Brewery, suddenly they'd come out and a band would be playing out in the street. And an impromptu stage would have been erected, you know, a few barrels and maybe a cart set up. And someone you knew and someone you trusted would have appeared up on top of this cart. In this case, this particular day, a man called John Scully appeared. He's your local public representative. He's your local councillor. Not only that, he's your local publican. So you didn't know him from electing him to the council, you probably knew him from pulling your pint in the pub. And in addition to that, look at this head of paper. There's his company up on the right-hand side. He's running the local tea, wine, spirit and provision shop. He's also selling your hardware, your china, your cups, your delf, you name it. So everybody would have known John Scully. John Scully would have been kind of revered in society because he's the man that you meet practically every day. You bring a cup, you go down to Scully's. If you want to buy tea, you go to Scully's. So he's somebody you really know. If you want to, get the drainage fixed, you go to Scully's because basically he's your counsellor as well. He appears up on this impromptu stage in James Street and he's making statements like, Irish men are fighting. So now we're getting an introduction to the war. And he's saying they're there side by side with the Welsh and the English and the Scottish, all of our colleagues, and they're fighting in Europe, and this is the famous line, for freedom, for fatherland, and for Christianity. So there's the rallying call, come join the war. They're young, they're influential. These are people who are looking at their existing trades beginning to disappear, particularly anybody who had been involved with horses would find that their trade is now disappearing. So people who return themselves in the census as being a groom or a saddler or a saddle maker or anybody associated with caring for horses, a stable boy even, suddenly horses are being replaced by mechanisation. So that trade, that tradition that you knew is disappearing. And here's a chance to go and one, maybe use that trade at the war because horses are still being used in World War I. Or secondly, go get another trade in the army. Huge opportunity. Another opportunity, get out of James Street, get out of the Landleaf Cottage, get out of Ballyfermot and go see France, for example, or go see Belgium. You were getting this massive opportunity to go. And you'd actually be following the band because the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, that's what RTF means there, they were there with their band and they would produce a speaker and he came out with things. Look, lads, it would be shameful if we leave all the fighting to the Englishmen. So you can see why they were thinking about going. Took that from a book called A City of Wartime by Corey Gates. You can get that in the library if anybody wants to go through it. I find it a great little book for reference. It's not one you'd read going to bed. you know, it's a heavy going one, but it just gives you a picture of Dublin at the particular time. And I went digging just to find John Scully's head of paper to find out more about him and see what his motivations were. So you could see how a situation like that arose. I can tell you that one of the men who went was our William Ryan. And William Ryan joined the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, and he later transferred to the machine gun course. So you could see he was learning, you know, to use this fairly modern technology at the time of World War I. And sadly, he's killed on the 18th of July, 1915 at Gallipoli. So he's one of the fallen at Gallipoli. So that's just over 100 years ago, 103 years ago. He has no known grave. We never found him. So there's a little bit of Ballyfermot somewhere in Gallipoli. Okay? And he's commemorated on this memorial here. This is the Helleys Memorial in Gallipoli. And his name is one of 474 other Dublin Fusiliers who are never found either. So they're all named, and if you could see that in close detail, all of that little wall around there just contains all the names and into the regiment. So that's just one boy from Ballyfermot who gets caught up in World War I, and it's a little bit of the story. Sad to say the story doesn't end there, so we're going to go back and have another look at the family tree. Here we are. Here's William, married to Bridget, and by this time he's deceased on the 15th of July 1915. But you can see there's another child. His son William was born just less than a month after his father was killed. So there's a little boy who never knew his dad. So it's just to kind of complete the story and to bring it right around full circle. Kind of a sad story, but that's one of the war dead, World War I dead from Ballyfermot. And that war is still raging 100 years ago at the moment. The armistice is a month away from this very day. So if we were back in 1918, we'd be saying, is this war ever going to end? It's a month away, the end of the war. And I don't know whether anyone saw the Leinster yesterday. So that's one of the big turning points in the war, the torpedoing of the Leinster just outside the Kishbank near Dunleary. And postal sorter workers were caught up in that completely. And only one of them, one of the 22 that were actually on board, survived it. But I think nearly 580, I think is the figure for the death on the Leinster. The biggest single loss of life in the Irish Sea ever. So that's another thing that you would have been reading in the papers 100 years ago if you were having your breakfast. That's what you would be pulling out today. But this is the story of William Ryan and his little boy born just about 3 or 4 weeks after he was killed at the front. So
now
just there. Yeah.
Sending voice against horsemen going out to that war.
Pardon?
Was there no dissenting voice?
There was. See, at this, in 1918, what happened was Britain tried to bring conscription in. And that actually was the beginning of the end. Don't forget, we had the Rising in the middle, and then you have, by 1918, we tried to bring conscription in. And that is the one thing you don't do with Irish people. You don't tell them what to do. It was different if it was a voluntary recruitment on the side of the street. That was your decision to go for all the motivations that I gave you. You know, new trade, opportunity, see the world. You know, you were really getting a chance to go at a young age. But it's different when conscription comes in, and that's when everything just goes completely pear-shaped here, and they start losing control of Ireland. And that's why what's going to happen next is what happens next. So that's just one story that I have about a Ballyfermot lad. I have another one for you. Did a fair bit of rooting around to see what I could find. And here's another chap called James Knox. And funny enough, he's in the Lewis machine gun section. And he again is in the Royal Dublin Fusiliers. And what I found out about him was quite interesting. He's the fourth son of a man called George Wilson Knox. Now, when I saw that name, I thought it was a Presbyterian name. And it actually looks like there was a change in religion somewhere back when you go tracing back the family, doing me, who do you think were it again? But he married, his father married a lady called Bridget, and the whole family were born down around Wexford, because the mum is from Wexford. And eventually they come up to Dublin, and this chap, James Knox, he enlists and he ends up in France and in Flanders. He's actually killed in a place called Miramont. And I'm delighted to say I was in Miramont this summer. I went over especially to try and see if we could place where it was in relation to everything else. It's about 3 miles from the famous Somme. And he's actually commemorated on the memorial there. And I'll show you that in a few minutes. But there was an interesting piece in his record, and look at what his lieutenant said about him. This talk about James Knox. It says, his death was a grave loss to my party, and was much regretted by the officers and men of his company, for as you know, he was the most popular with all who knew him. He was a lucky man. I thought that was a really strange line to put in. Now, we were discussing this at home. Was he lucky at cards? Was he lucky at playing games? We don't know. But it was just an odd line to put in. And his lieutenant goes on to say, I'm unable to describe my appreciation of his gallant conduct and good work while under fire. Save that, and this is the line, he died the death of a gallant Irish soldier. So that's another boy from Ballyfermot. And I was lucky enough to find a picture of him. And that is one of the memorial cards that would have appeared in the paper. You should sometimes find them, sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not. The war is awkward to research. You know, you have to take your losses. And what I mean is, sometimes you don't get the information you might be looking for. But he is commemorating of the Theatrical Memorial, and his address is given quite clearly as Rosario, Ballyfermot, Chapel Lizard, Dublin. So that kind of gives us a clue as to the side of Ballyfermot we're looking at. Okay, far up. And there is the Theatrical Memorial on the Somme. It's the biggest war memorial in France. Do you know how many names are in that memorial? 90,000 names. All missing. They never found them. And our chap Knox is among them. And all of that land, as far as the eye can see, would have been just a mud bath. It was completely churned up. The images of that area during the war are horrific, and it's really hard to actually imagine it as a battlefield today, because it's beautiful farmland, beautifully cultivated. And one of the things you can see out in the distance there is a wood, and that's called Theatrical Wood. And Miramont would be beyond that again. So when I said it was about 3 miles away, you know, it's further away in the countryside. But Theatrical Wood is very important to our northern cousins. And believe it or not, the government of Ireland have bought that wood as a present for Northern Ireland, and they keep it as an open memorial. You can go and visit it. But the rules of it are there can be no commemoration in it. So they've restored the trenches. You can go visit them, you can actually see them, go on a tour of it, but they'll never be allowed to unfurl a flag of any description or have any type of commemoration in it. And they were happy to do that because they actually got it. The British government wouldn't buy it though. The Irish government did. Part of the peace process, part of this kind of reconciliation, trying to solve the problems that we have. Now, I told you the house that the Knoxes lived in was Rosario. You saw the address on the card there a second ago. And that got me going because I was asking around, did anybody know where a house called Rosario was? And I was drawing blanks all along. So I religiously went through every Tom's directory I could get my hands on, following it year by year by year. And what I found out was the name of the house changed to Whitecross. And I think the father changed the name of the family home from Rosario to Whitecross in memory of his son. Because when you've no known grave and a vague memorial that might be built, how are you going to commemorate your son? And I think this is what the father did. He changed the name of the farm to Whitecross. And I could trace it as Whitecross through the Toms until 1928, 29, it changes, and it becomes Ardengrain, and Ardengrain is rafters. And I can trace that a step further for you because I found the plaque on Ken's site. You know Father Lamass Court, the back of the church? That's exactly where Knox's farm would have been. And that's a little map that's on the plaque from Father Lamass Court. The new flats that are built, or the apartments at the back of the church. And there's a map there that kind of shows you just about there. The big one is the church, and there's the farm. And was it used as a presbytery at one time?
It was, yeah. It was a priest's house. Father Wall lived in there for a time, and
so it was connected to the church all the time.
I don't know whether many people are from Ballyfermot Heritage, but like the house hasn't gone that long, you know.
The actual house. It's only because they built those new flats that took it away. Right, so can everybody place that? It's literally behind the church, it's at the roundabout, just down there. And that would be enough. So even the name of it, like you can trace 4 names for that particular farm in approximately 100 years. So it was Rosario first.
There was also attached roof on it.
Was there?
And the door was always painted red.
Right.
And for a number of years, I was a kid, I lived in Colcart Drive. For a number of years, the windows were yellow, but you were never allowed in. You know, so.
Okay, so we moved from being Knox's. The next owner was Rafters. Rafters took it, and the name changed. And they say that Ardnagrena was because either the rising sun or the setting sun. That means the height of the sunshine, or So the name has been changed from Rosario to Whitecross, and from Whitecross to Ardnagrena, and from Ardnagrena now to Father Lamass Court. So just one place has had 4 names in 100 years, and you can kind of from each of the names trace another little bit of Ballyfermot's history. So I think the father seen this type of thing before, somebody changing the name of the house to commemorate a tragedy in the family, and I think that's why the father changed the name of the farm to Whitecross. But that's why World War I, the boys of Ballyfermot in World War I. So just to give you an idea, all of these world events impacted on a small rural community in County Dublin, and probably in a way you mightn't have realised. And then it impacted in other ways too. Imagine opening your newspaper and there's a whole centre special with the roll of honour telling you all the people that you might or might not know who have died. Can you imagine the impact in a rural community of somebody reading, one of the Knoxes from the Landleague cottages was killed in the war, or one of the Knoxes from Rosario was killed, or one of the Ryans from Landleague Cottage. You can imagine the impact of that. The Ryans was a big family, like there's 6, 7, 8, 9 of them, 9 children. That must have been a massive impact when they heard that William had been killed, knowing that Bridget was expecting a baby. So you can imagine the type of conversation. So that type of thing would have been happening. No Facebook, no Twitter. You haven't got phones really. So you're getting your newspaper and you're getting all this news in your newspaper. Neighbours are among the dead. That's my example there. The other thing was people were coming back from the war really maimed. People come back without a limb. And an awful lot of the injured were sent to Dublin to recuperate. Dublin was being used like as a field hospital, which made it even worse. We were seeing all these people around. So the anti-war sentiment was rising rapidly here. I mean, nobody was impressed with this. The other thing we didn't like was they were now taking the hay and the straw and the remaining horses. The line for collecting them was getting wider and wider. At this stage in the war, they're down at Offaly. They're actually caling every horse from a circle drawn around Offaly all the way up to Dundalk around Dublin, gathering them in, and all the hay and all the straw. So you're gathering in your fodder for your animals for the winter, and some army guy comes along and says, sorry, I'm taking that, it's going to France. So you can imagine the kind of anti-war sentiment and how it would build up. You wouldn't be impressed, none of us would be. So that's just another angle to kind of think about. And here's another one for you. You're putting your milk in your porridge and you're saying, that's terribly watering. I mean, something wrong with this. And the man at home is saying, oh dear Lord, I'm after watering it down. Don't tell me it was watered down before I had to go water to it, because we're trying to make things stretch. The cowkeepers of Dublin, and there was an association of cowkeepers in Dublin, are in the papers continuously between 1917 and 1918 being accused of watering down the milk. It's called adulterating the milk. It's a cartoon I found because one of the judges stood up to the cowkeeper. So that's a judge kind of tackling one of the well-fed cowkeepers of Dublin, one of the dairymen of Dublin. And basically this particular cartoon relates to what the judge said in the Irish, as reported in the Irish Times in May 1917. And the judge said there has to be an end to this robbery of the poor, because watering down the milk is basically robbing everybody, because you're buying it at inflated prices and it's being watered down. One farmer in Crumlin ends up getting 2 months hard labour. He had watered down the milk he was supplying on various occasions by 14%, 18%, and finally he caught when he did it by 49%. So it was 50-50, you know, you're getting more, as much water as you were milk. This isn't going to help a situation where people are struggling to put food on the table and you're getting watered down milk into the house. It's not going to be very impressive. And also you have the flu epidemic starting to trigger off. So people are not getting the nutrition they might need that will help them fight an epidemic like the flu. So just to bear that in mind. That's another, that actually is quite, you know, a telling story that people you would expect to supply you with good quality stuff weren't actually doing it. Now, 1916. It's hard to get anything kind of related to 1916 in this general area, except for the fact that there was a lot of training and a lot of drilling took place, particularly in the sand pits down here in Chicor. They were storing arms there as well. This area would have fallen into the 4th Battalion, and we certainly had a very active unit in Chapelizet. Here's one lady, though, who was affected by the 1916 Rising in a rather unusual way. I'd like you to meet Marion Moore, who filled out her compensation claim after the 1916 Rising because she had a watch in for repair in a company called Hopkins and Hopkins. And Hopkins and Hopkins, that's their headed paper there. You might just about make out the O'Connell Monument, and their company was right beside the O'Connell Monument on O'Connell Bridge. His Majesty's government sent over the Helga to try and put down the Rising and literally bombed O'Connell Street to bits, and Marion's Moore watch went up in the whole thing because Hopkins and Hopkins was completely destroyed and she had to go and put in a claim. She's living in Sarsfield House in Chicago, so she's literally down the road, and I wouldn't say she was about her watch. You'd be glad to know she got fully compensated for the watch that went missing. And Hopkins, I don't think they ever reopened at that site. I don't think they ever did. Did they?
Yeah.
McDougal's definitely did.
No, they were there all right.
Yeah.
Because I unfortunately bought an engagement ring for the wife in '74.
Yeah.
So
In
they were
Hopkins
there
and
in the
Hopkins.
80s.
Yeah.
And then they
Okay.
went, you know.
All right, but then McDougal's was a really interesting story. You know their foolery, you know the happy ring that's further up. They were really interesting. Here's an angle on 1916 you can ever think of. McDougal's are going along fine, businesses, you know, ticking over. Suddenly a revolution breaks out in Dublin. Next up is a gunboat arrives up the Liffey, destroys all of O'Connell Street. Think how the son of old Mr. MacDowell felt when he came in and discovered that his premises, both in O'Connell Street and Henry Street, had been completely obliterated, and the son is the executor for his father, who had recently died. That is your worst nightmare as an executor of any will, because as executor you are responsible for making sure all the assets of the estate stay safe until such time as all the claims can be satisfied. So what happened with McDougal's is the claim for McDougal's goes to pages. There's loads of it. He had to itemise every single item that was in McDougal's shop. And I'm not talking about the jewellery, I'm talking about the tiles on the floor, the sanitary fittings, the display cases. All of those had to be absolutely faithfully restored before the will could be executed. An angle of 1916 you never would have dreamt of. So McDougal's further up the street, this could very well have been a claim for McDougal's, for something in for repair in McDougal's. This happens to be Hopkins and Hopkins, and it's a lady from Inchicore. She's actually living in Sarsfield House. She can just about make it out in her phone there, and she said that it was just, by her belief, her jewellery was destroyed by fire in Hopkins and Hopkins. So that's an actual 1916 compensation claim. They moved fast on the compensation claims because they knew they had made a mess of 1916. Executing the leaders of the Rising was a serious mistake. And they decided that they would pay up the compensation, any type of compensation that was put in. So people put in for things like the watch, and another chap put in for a pack of dates, which went missing out of Broadstone railway station. And the grant, he didn't know whether the military had taken them or whether the volunteers had taken them. They were the best claims to put in, because if there was a hint that the military were involved, of course they were going to pay up. And would you believe, William Jemison, who ran the distillery in Smithfield, he put in a claim for his cigars that went missing out of the boardroom. £25, and he decided he wouldn't claim for the box the cigars were in, just the cigars. He couldn't be sure again if the volunteers smoked them or the military smoked them. So that's just an aside. Anyway, you get the idea that this is how life could be impinged upon, how your life could change. You know, suddenly could be a total upheaval because of events, and you're just living away happily in Sarsfield House in Inchicore. Now, times moved. After 1916, the battalions regrouped and the volunteers reorganised. There was a volunteer convention held in Jones's Road, that's Croke Park, in that general area. And there's an account taken from Joseph Kinsella's witness statements. His witness statements is probably one of the best for this part of Dublin. Now, there's a lot of others, but I use his because he's very descriptive. And he describes here about the different companies. But what I like about this one is F Company met in the Emmet Hall in Inchicore. Now, would you know where that is? Do you know the church in front of Richmond Barracks in Inchicore? You're heading for town, so you're on Emmet Road. Emmet Hall is the first building, just past the turning for Bolton. You know, the right turn there. Emmet Hall is right there. It was actually used, the building nearby would be Mallon's house, Michael Mallon. So he describes when he's been brought to Richmond Barracks, he looks at the house to see if you see any of the family that's brought in, and all he saw was the dog in the window. So the family dog was up in the window as Michael Mallon was being brought into Richmond Barracks. So he thought he might see the family in the house, but he didn't. Anyway, Emmet Hall was there, and all the meetings were taking place. And basically, Kinsella is telling us that all the companies have reorganised by 1918. So you get the idea that we're beginning to get a lot more organised at that stage, even though the war is still on, World War I is still on, things are changing, and attitudes have really changed in Dublin as well. Continue on, this is another piece from Joseph Kinsella's witness statements, and he is the intelligence officer of 4th Battalion IRA, and this is an account that he gives of what was going on in the Inchicore works and how he was actually getting people to repair damaged weapons in the Inchicore works. And they literally had a grenade factory running there as well. And he gives detailed accounts of them making munitions, repairing guns, and he basically says, can we get all the boys together? Can we form a new battalion of these, like an engineering corps? And these are all people employed in the Inchicore works. The Inchicore works becomes a hotbed for backing up the whole revolution in Ireland. And as I said to you earlier, the census results for 1911 show us an awful lot of people working in Inchicore were from Ballyfermot anyway. So there's Ballyfermot people involved in this as well. And again, we get a mention in the Emmet Hall, not too far from, it's opposite St. Patrick's Athletics basically. So they held their meetings there, they gathered there, so they could make their plans there. You weren't too far from home, you were walking distance from home for that. And here's another account They're talking about the Inchicore Works now at this stage is being raided nearly on a fortnightly basis by the British. They never found anything because we didn't tip offs that the raids were going to happen. They had a military post there all the time. The British Army were actually installed in the works, and yet they still couldn't figure out. They knew something was going on, but they never actually found anything. The foundry department, they could turn out anything up to 36 grenades every day, so it was very productive, you know. I don't know what else wasn't being done, but this will give you an idea. And they could do a lot of drilling and tapping on the grenades, so they were actually making sure that everything was correct. And then in about a fortnight, the scheme worked out splendidly. They were now up to a production of 40 to 50 finished grenades. So you get the idea that the works was actually supplying the revolution behind the scenes. And this is the beginning of heading into the War of Independence, which, as you know, 100 years next January, that kicks off. So this is us preparing for what's ahead. Another little incident, I haven't got details of, but you're all familiar with the 7th lock. There's 3 of the locks in the canal are, strictly speaking, Ballyfermot's, okay? So the 6th, the 7th and 8th belong, if you like, to Ballyfermot. The 9th is Clontarf, just to try and set out an area. But there's an account of an incident at this bridge. So you can see it's kind of a humpty back bridge. And they had a loaded lorry heading out from Inchicore, the Inchicore Works, and it's loaded with equipment for the volunteers. And of course, it stalls on the bridge, and it can either get it up or get it down, and it's stuck on the bridge. And the only thing they could do was unload the equipment that was on the lorry. And they describe in great detail how they took these metal plates out of the back of the lorry and tossed them into the canal. And Kinsell's line is, and to the best of my knowledge, those plates are still in the bed of the canal. So if anybody's going diving, they do a quick check over the 7 lock and see if they can find any metal that might have been belonged to the Inchicore Works. They would be delighted to get it back. But anyway, I'm just saying, these little tantalising things I mentioned. Someday someone's going to be clearing that part of the canal, something's going to be found, and they'll be wondering what it is, and we can tell them because we know it's in a witness statement at the time. Now, in the War of Independence, things aren't too good. And here's a newspaper cutting of another machine gun related Ballyfermot, if you like, only this time it's War of Independence. A little bit hard to read this, but take it from me, these are the RIC men who come up from Lucan and Chapelizod and are patrolling this area. And they're patrolling the area because there had been an incident earlier in the day near the nugget factory in Bluebell. The nugget boot factory, boot polish factory, remember your nugget boot polish, made in Bluebell, would have been again an employer in the area. There had been an incident there whereby a lorry was burnt out. And they're patrolling the area, trying to find the guys responsible for burning out the lorry. The guys who are responsible for burning out the lorry, or who are connected with them, get the wind of the patrol being in the area. And this is where we have this incident, whereby a guy called Hallisey, can you make what I'm saying there, Sergeant Hallisey, and a Constable Mulrooney, the both shot. It's a huge War of Independence incident in Ballyfermot. That's the newspaper account. In this it says, I think, that there was 1 seriously injured and 1 killed. Now, I always love to compare and contrast, so I was lucky enough to find the witness statement of Colonel O'Connor. And he talks about the attack on the RIC at Ballyfermot. Now, there's slight difference in the 2 accounts, so I don't know which you believe, but somewhere in the middle is probably the truth. And that gives you an account of the British military transport was being seized at every opportunity. They're holding up the lorries, they're hijacking them basically. And here's the one about smashing it up. One day a lorry is taken down to Bluebell Lane, near the nugget factory at Bluebell, and destroyed by Borleys, set on fire. 4 RIC men go down to examine the truck. The guys are in the vicinity, O'Connor's in the vicinity at the time. They took up position near the railway bridge at Ballyfermot. Now that's not the one on the Kylemore Road, but it's the one at Killeen. It's the one Kylemore Road is much more recent, the one at Killeen. So they're up at the railway bridge at Killeen. The RIC men were returning to their station in Lucan. Lucan and Chapelizod look after this part of the world. They ambushed them, they killed 2 and wounded 1. The newspaper account says 1 injured, 1 killed. So I don't know which is completely true. The British military arrived on the scene in a short time and we withdrew as quickly as we could. They disappeared into the countryside. So you get the way a witness account could be slightly different to the newspaper account, but they are both about the same incident. And I found in the City Archive a picture of the nugget boot polish factory in Bluebell. And when I showed it to Jerry earlier, he said, my goodness, I remember it now, you know, so it's these things of kind of jogging your memory. It would have been the Camak Mills prior to this. And later on it was the boot polish factory. And of course, has anyone ever heard of the nugget cottages in Bluebell? They would have been connected to, they would have been for the mill workers, and they were known as the nugget cottages. But anyway, that's just to give you an idea. This is it probably in the early 70s, late 60s. But as you can see, it's still kind of rural, a big mill building kind of coming up out of the countryside. I know there's modern fixtures there, but you can kind of get the image. Imagine a lorry, a British military lorry, being burnt out near there, and the guys are running up the canal and getting across the railway. You know, you can see kind of the image of it all would have happened. And would you believe another thing I found when I came to Routing was the actual typewritten police report of that particular incident at the bridge in Ballyfermot. So you can find it's like a big jigsaw puzzle. You know something's happened, but you've got to try and find all the little bits and find out everybody else's interpretation of the actual incident. And they do state here in kind of detail, without going into it, but you get the idea that they're reporting back the fact that there had been this big attack in Ballyfermot, a hugely serious event of the time. And one last thing I did find, and this is from Jerry's site in Clondalkin, it's the funeral of the RIC man, Willie Mulrooney. He was brought to the north of Ireland for his funeral. His funeral was up near Newry, and look at the crowds at his funeral, and was being carried to the procession. So just to show you how one newspaper account can actually be related to something, and this all happened locally. So, you know, these are the events. It's our national war of independence. It's the fight between the auxiliaries and the RIC and our volunteers. It's the follow-on from 1916. And this is Ballyfermot's part in that whole story. And that's all going to kick off now in January next year. The centenary of that is next year. One other little incident that I found, this might be the make it laugh moment. It's an incident up at Clover Hill. A farmer, Nicholas Archdale, an elderly farmer up in Clover Hill, we give the address as Clondalkin. Today we would say it's Clover Hill, Ballyfermot. And he sees 4 men in front of his house. He asks them what they wanted, and one of them produced a revolver, as you do, like, you know, instead of shaking hands, we produce a revolver. And he says, I'll soon show you what we're doing. Mr. Archdale then caught hold of one of the men, and he got away. Another of the men intervened, saying, don't shoot him, he's too old. So nothing really happened. They went away. Mrs. Archdale then drove into Clondalkin, and she told the civic guard what had happened. And these 2, Sergeant McGillicuddy and 2 guards called Wood and Murphy, were sent out in pursuit of the men and arrested 4 of them. They found them near Ballyfermot. They took from them a Welby .45 revolver, and another had a .39 revolver, so there were 2 guns involved. They gave their names as James Doran of Summerhill Road, Kingstown, that's Dunleary, a Bernard Farrell at the Gate Lodge in Chicor, another man called Michael Houlihan at Patrick's Terrace in Chicor, and a fellow called Henry Gunning's Terrace in Chicor, and they were all brought out to Ballydonnan and handed over to the military in Ballydonnan. So you can find these newspaper cuttings. You mightn't find a reference to it anywhere else. this time in our history, 1921, 1922, a lot of the stuff kind of stops. You can't find the other records because they are gone back to Britain and we haven't got them back here. And then of course we lost an awful lot in subsequent events in the Custom House and in Forecourt. So you're tantalisingly trying to put the story together. But that's just another incident, but it's actually a Ballyfermot incident, although the headline says armed men at Clondalk. Now, the big one. Has anyone ever heard of the ambush on the troop train at Ballyfermot? This is one event, and it is a massive turning point in Irish history, because this is probably the very last big event prior to the calling of the truce. And this is the reason, I think it's the final straw for calling the truce in many, many ways. So, in July 1921, we have this. Now, it's a bit long-winded, but suffice to say, a train is coming out with troops on it from Houston, as we would call it today, station. They're coming out and they're going under the railway bridge up at the Cleveland Road. And as they go through on the train, petrol-soaked sacks are thrown down on top of the train as it goes by. And then the guys produce yet again another machine gun, a Thompson machine gun. This is a talk about machine guns tonight, really. And they also threw lighted fire down on top of the train. It's a massive event because the train actually goes up, goes on fire, but continues on its journey because they're afraid to stop. And it continues to the next stop, which is actually Clondalk. But then they actually keep going to the Curragh. And that's because they can get them medical help in the Curragh. This incident happened a few days before the truce is called. It's one of the last huge events in the War of Independence. And it is probably the idea that now they have access to machine guns. They have access to actually taking a train out of it as it goes under a railway bridge. It's that type of magnitude of the incidents that are happening. It's not just a local ambush or anything like this. Is huge. These are the type of decisions, incidents that actually turn the tide and the calling of the truce. Because one of the things that gets missed is the truce is actually called on the British side. They could have gone the other way. They could have turned Ireland into something like the Western Front with big bunkers and literally military law and, completely imposed it. They didn't. Someone had to stand back from the brink, and it was actually the British in the end that stood back because of this type of thing. They were running out of money. They're just coming out of World War I. They cannot afford to take this on their doorstep. They have to do something. And this is one of those huge incidents that comes at the very end of the War of Independence. And what happens is, although the Government of Ireland Act had been passed in 1920, which in effect created Northern Ireland, and that's done the year before, it's there, done and dusted, we end up with a truce, ceasefire talks are called, and the truce, and the Anglo-Irish Treaty is signed on the 6th of December 1921 and creates the state, pretty much the country that we're living in now. I know we kept changing, we've evolved an awful lot, but pretty much the foundation of the Irish states. And of course, not everybody's happy with this, so we have an incident up at the Red Cow, the shooting at the Red Cow of a young chap called John Monks up at the Red Cow. Now that's how his memorial appears today on the left-hand side. You see a little black cross on the base, but you can work out from the base that the cross wasn't always like that. Very, very hard to get a picture of this now. Has anyone seen the Red Cow recently? Trying to ramble around what it would have been, the little side roads. This is over the Bluebell side of things. Very, very difficult to get. I had to send himself up on the motorbike to actually get the photograph of the memorial to John Monks. What's easier to see is the Bluebell Cemetery where he's buried. He shot a Red Cow. He is employed in the Inchicore Works. And the story goes that when his body was found, a woman appeared with a horse and cart, and claimed the body. She had come all the way out from Inchicore to claim him. I presume it's his mother, but certainly a family relative, and she claims the body and brings it back for burial. There's kind of no real account of what happened to him. You know, we don't know who did what to what, but Red Cow becomes a place where an awful lot of assassinations and incidents take place. And there's a couple of memorials there, but I picked out John Monks because I know it's in Inchicore, and I know the monks have family in and around this general area still. Here's the unveiling of the cross as it would have looked. And that's a family member, a man called Dowling, actually unveiling the cross. And it talks about John Monks being killed near this spot. You know, sometimes you get more information in a subsequent newspaper accounts when they put the memorial up to him. And they spoke about, they put it in the terms of Emmett died, you know, like relating it back to the time of Robert Emmett and that. And they paid the last post, and they laid a wreath at the memorial up at the Red Cow. But the top of the cross, I think it was damaged during the roadworks on the Red Cow, so they just have the smaller cross put there in position. But that's what it would have looked like at the original time. Now, one other incident I want to talk about. This is the Freeman's Journal, which doesn't pull any punches when they're describing this incident. Everybody know the Lewis at Blackhorse Bridge. You know the way it leaves the canal, goes left, and it's heading up along the Nace Road at that point. Did you ever notice a memorial set into the wall of the park on the left-hand side? Well, you might notice that. But you do know the flat complex on the right-hand side, called Bernard Curtis House. Why is it called Bernard Curtis House? And the reason it's called Bernard Curtis House is he and 3 others were setting landmines at that spot to catch the Irish National Soldiers who were coming in from Baldonnel. At this time now, we're in Civil War territory. They were coming in and they had laid a landmine there. A landmine went off early and it blew them up, not the soldiers. The incident at Blackhorse Bridge is one of them that's responsible for subsequent events that happen in Kilmainham Jail. In the day after this incident, almost in retaliation, Erskine Childers is executed in Kilmainham Jail because he was found in possession of a gun. The gun he was found in possession of was given to him by Michael Collins, ironically. And Erskine Childers is of the Barton family, who had actually gone to negotiate a treaty in the first place. So they're a very high-profile political family, but what Cosgrave and his government were doing at the time is they were trying to send a message, no matter who you are, if you're found with a gun, we're literally calling the shots, if you excuse the pun. And it is as a result of this incident at Blackhorse Bridge. I pulled up the account. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's absolutely horrific in its description. They were blown to pieces. One lad actually lost his leg and he's brought to stitches and he dies the next day. But that's why we have a flats complex beside that site called Bernard Curtis House in memory of one of the volunteers who was killed at that spot. And I even have a closer up, this is a close up of the site where they blew it up. They blew a massive crater in the road. The road would have been a lot higher than that. And if you look at the point, when you realise where you are and you spot the memorial in the wall into the park, you can work out that that part has never been built on, and there's something a bit different about the road. You'd know now that something awful had happened at that scene. And here is the memorial I'm talking about. This little thing, there's 2 of them actually, one's about, I'd say they're about 10 metres apart. One is Bernard Curtis, and the other one is another chap who was found shot at Blackhorse. So Blackhorse and Red Cow become places where all these clandestine assassinations and things took place. It's very rural Dublin up until relatively recently. And there is Bernard Curtis's grave in Blue Glen Cemetery. So both John Monks and Bernard Curtis are buried in Blue Glen. Of Bernard Curtis, just to think for a minute, the world that he lived in. And this brings us back to the world that everybody out this part was living in. Bernard Curtis himself lived He worked in Inchicore Works. He set the landmine at Blackhorse Bridge, just beside Inchicore. Blew himself up there, and he's buried in Bluegrass Cemetery. His world was very, very small, but he was part of the big national story, the big international story, part of our history, like the boys from Ballyfermot. Thank you all very, very much. I hope you enjoyed the talk.